So friends, we've been doing a Bible study about the colors of the Bible and what those colors symbolize. We've looked at some of the other dominant colors like red and blue. And now we're going to look at that third primary color. Can you guess what it is? Need some help? How about this? That's right, we're on yellow today. Now, yellow in the Bible is kind of a weird choice because yellow itself only shows up 4 times in our Bible, in 4 verses. Now, 3 of those verses are in the Old Testament, and they're a reference to like jaundice type yellow, yellow hair that's a sign of illness in this reference in Leviticus. And then the other time is going to be in Revelation 9:17, where it says that one of the Revelation horses is as yellow as sulfur. And of course, sulfur is that really smelly mineral. So this color of yellow is a reference to that as well. Now, yellow as a color shows up a couple times when we do think of like Daniel 10:6, yellow as jasper. But the truth is that when you're talking in Hebrew, there are only 2 types of words that you're going to think about with yellow. In the Hebrew language, yellow is either the yellow of illness, as we see in the other, or, and this is why we're talking about today, the yellow is interchangeable with the word gold. Now, gold is going to show up 441 times in our Bible. It is a precious metal. Gold is a color, but most of all, it was a way of riches, right? King Nebuchadnezzar himself makes an image of gold. Much of the temple is gold. The ark is made of gold. Lampshades are made of gold. It actually says that in 1 Kings 10:21, all of King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold. That he had no silver because he thought it was of no value, but gold he highly valued. Now, when you think of the color yellow, and when you're talking about the Greek words, you're actually going to get 3 different ones. In that, you're going to have a yellow gem, so like the gold we talked about. You're also going to have a green yellow, and then you're going to have yellow as in frankincense yellow. And that's, frankincense is like a sap. So it is kind of a browner yellow that you're thinking of in the Greek form. Now, when you're talking yellow, we've been using this Bible study a little bit out of Woman of Noble Characters, put this together, and in it she says yellow is the most visible color of the spectrum. It's a secondary light source at times, and it is the first wavelength of light that's processed by the human eye. And I think that's kind of interesting, because if yellow is to symbolize faith and God, then it's great to think that it's the first thing we see. And it is seen to symbolize faith. For example, in 1:7, it says, faith is more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire. So this notion of yellow reminding us of gold and thus reminding us of faith, because faith is stronger than gold. Yellow also symbolizes joy. It symbolizes new life. And we'll come back to that. Yellow symbolizes, excuse me, yellow symbolizes, goodness, yellow symbolizes energy, and yellow symbolizes the glory of God. Now, I said we come back to life a little bit, because when I think of yellow, I think of the sun, S-U-N, or the sunrise. The word S-U-N is going to show up 176 times in our Bible, while sunrise is going to show up 13 times. And 3 of those are just such beautiful passages. For example, in Habakkuk 3:4-14, his splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Isn't that cool? Or how about in 2 Samuel? He is like the light of the mornings at sunrise on a cloudless morning, like the brightness after rain that brings grass from the earth. Or, of course, the most important sunrise, Mark 16:2. Just after the sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb. Yep, that's right, the sunrise at the resurrection. So when we think about the sunrise, we think about the glory of God. We think about the energy, and yes, we think about new life, as we saw at the resurrection. Now, sometimes gold is not just as in precious gold. It could be a reference to, as we see in the Psalms, the doves are seen to have feathers that were gold. Or this notion of gold is to remind us that God is greater than gold. For it even says in Haggai, silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord. So everything belongs to God, and God is greater than everything, even gold. And what's beautiful is we can remind ourselves of that. We can remind ourselves that God is more valuable than gold. I especially love Psalm 119, verse 127. Therefore, I love your commandments above gold, above even fine gold. It's this notion that we can love God more than we can love the gold in our life. Now, when we think about gold, we can think about what it represents, right? It represents richness and value. And so what are the things that you value? And some people do value gold, but it also tells us in the Bible you can't have two masters. You've got to pick one. And so when we see the color yellow and we think about gold, we can think about, do we choose the sun, S-U-N, S-O-N, or do we choose that other translation, the gold, right? Are we going to be looking at yellow as something that reminds us of our faith, or are we looking at something that guides us away from our faith? And so when you're thinking about the colors, I invite you to think about the ways that they encourage you to enrich your faith, right? We see things a lot, and that's often a way that we process. Now, of course, it's not the only way we process, thankfully, right? We have ears to hear, and we have nose to smell, and we can touch, and we can taste. But our eyes are really an important thing. And the color yellow is often used because we respond to it quicker. It's a much flashier color. In fact, in our peripheral vision, you see yellow much better than you see red by like 2.5 or something. That's why it shows up on stop in like our street lights. You've got the red, green, and yellow, because yellow is a color that we respond to. And hopefully we also respond to God with that we see God right away, that we know God right away. I'm not bothered by the fact that yellow doesn't show up as much in our Bible. That word has become ours with time, right? But I think about all the different translations we have for yellow, right? All the different things in our lives that are yellow. And so I invite you to think about those things and ask yourself, how did they remind you of God? When you see something yellow, what does it say to you? You know, when you see, especially like a yellow bird, there's lots of birds that are yellow. How does that remind you of God? Or when you are seeing things, it's often like a good toy option, right? If you're working with your kids, what do those symbols remind you? That brightness, right? How about yellow food, right? There's a lot of yellow food as well. And what does that say to you? So how do you think when you see those colors, how can they remind you of God? And so we're going to continue to expand our mind as we look at the spectrum of colors and ask ourselves, what do they say about God? Okay, I hope you go exploring the color wheel this week and ask you what it can teach you about the divine. Bye.